The Galactic Federation had seen countless planets, each with its own defense systems. Massive space fortresses, powerful energy shields, and heavily armed orbital fleets were the norm. Every intelligent species understood one thing: defense was survival. That was why the Federation was deeply concerned when they studied Earth. The reports were clear: no planetary shields, no orbital defense grid, no massive battle stations guarding the planet. It was unthinkable. A species as advanced as humans had left their homeworld exposed. To the Federation, it was madness. Ambassador Jorvan of the Kalathi race sat in the council chamber, staring at the report in disbelief. His reptilian fingers tapped nervously on the table. "This cannot be correct," he said, looking at the human representative, Admiral Ethan Carter. "Surely there is a mistake. You have no defense grid, no fortresses." Admiral Carter smiled, his expression calm. "That is correct." A murmur spread through the chamber. Representatives from over 50 species whispered among themselves, shocked by the response. Jorvan leaned forward. "Do you not understand the danger? Without proper defenses, your planet is an easy target for invasion. Any empire could wipe you out in days." Carter's smile didn't fade. "We are well aware of the dangers, Ambassador. But Earth is not defenseless." Jorvan frowned. He had studied humans enough to know they were not suicidal. But this made no sense. "Then explain," he demanded. Carter leaned back, glancing at the other delegates. "Tell me, Ambassador, how many wars has the Federation fought?" Jorvan hesitated. "We have fought many conflicts," he admitted. "That is why we build strong defenses." Carter nodded. "And how many wars has Earth fought?" Jorvan didn't answer. He knew the reports. Too many. Humans had fought more wars than any other species in the Federation. And unlike most, they did not fear war. They adapted, they learned, and most importantly, they won. Carter continued, "We do not rely on walls and shields. That is a passive defense. A barrier only delays the inevitable. We prefer a different strategy." Jorvan narrowed his eyes. "And what is that?" Carter's smile turned cold. "We let our enemies come, and then we make sure they never leave." The silence in the chamber was heavy. Some delegates shifted uncomfortably. Others whispered in hushed tones. The Federation had always considered humans aggressive, but this was something else. "Let me be clear," Carter said, his voice calm but firm. "Earth does not need shields or fortresses because our entire planet is a weapon. We do not wait behind walls. We fight. If an enemy comes for us, they will regret it." Jorvan studied him carefully. There was no arrogance in Carter's voice, just confidence. It sent a chill down his spine. Before Jorvan could respond, a new alert appeared on the Federation's data screens. A Xelvarn fleet had been spotted moving toward Sol, a powerful war force, armed and ready for conquest. Earth had no shields, no fortresses, and yet Carter's expression did not change. "Do not worry," the human said calmly. This was expected. Jorvan felt a growing sense of unease. Earth was not afraid, and that terrified him. The Xelvarn fleet moved through space like a storm, its warships cutting through the void toward Earth. They were a species that thrived on conquest, believing that brute force was the ultimate path to dominance. Their strategy was simple: overwhelm, crush, and subjugate. Inside the Federation Council, panic spread. Messages flooded the chamber as worried representatives watched the incoming attack. "They must deploy their defenses now," a Tyran delegate hissed. "We must warn Earth." But Admiral Ethan Carter stood calmly, arms crossed, as if this was nothing more than an ordinary event. Jorvan could not believe it. "Admiral," he said, voice tense, "the Xelvarn are not known for mercy. They will bombard your planet. Without shields, Earth will be reduced to ashes." Carter exhaled slowly, shaking his head. "No, they will land troops. They always do." Jorvan's eyes widened. "Why?" Their orbital weapons are strong enough to destroy cities from space. Because they don't want to destroy Earth, Carter explained. They want to take it. His expression darkened. And that is their mistake. The XL Varn fleet arrived in Earth's orbit, and just as Carter had predicted, they did not fire. Instead, massive dropships descended, piercing through the clouds, heading toward key locations, major cities, military bases, and what they believed were strategic targets. The alien commanders were confident. After all, Earth had no defenses. The first wave of ground troops landed near a human military installation. The XL Varn warriors, towering insectoid creatures in heavy armor, stormed forward, weapons ready. Their intelligence reports suggested they would face weak resistance. After all, no planetary shields meant no real military threat. They were wrong. As soon as the first XL Varn stepped out of the dropship, a single crack rang through the air. The alien soldier's head snapped back, a clean hole through its skull. Before the others could react, more shots followed. Precise, deadly. Human snipers, hidden in the terrain, picked off their targets with terrifying efficiency. Then the real battle began. From the shadows, from behind buildings, from underground bunkers, human forces emerged, not in open battle formations, but in hunting packs. They didn't march forward in ranks like the XL Varn. They struck fast, disappeared, and struck again. Grenades rained down from unseen locations, explosions ripping through the invading force. Small, mobile squads moved through the streets, eliminating enemies with precision. The XL Varn were powerful warriors, trained for direct combat. But this wasn't a battle. This was an ambush. And Earth was the trap. Back in the Federation Council, the live footage of the invasion played. Jorvin and the other delegates watched in stunned silence. The XL Varn troops were being slaughtered. They outnumbered the humans. They had stronger armor, heavier weapons. But it didn't matter. Humans never fought fair. Jorvin turned to Carter, shock on his face. This is not war. This is... Carter gave a small smile. Welcome to Earth's defense strategy. The XL Varn had thought Earth was weak. Now, they were learning the truth. No shields, no fortresses, because humanity itself was the ultimate weapon. The XL Varn commanders were confused. This was not how an invasion was supposed to go. Their intelligence reports had warned them of human resistance, but nothing like this. The humans weren't meeting them on the battlefield. They weren't fighting in formation. They were hunting. The XL Varn forces had been split into multiple landing zones across Earth. That was supposed to be an advantage. But instead of controlling the terrain, they had walked straight into a trap. Every street, every ruined building, every dark alley was a killing zone. Human snipers picked them off one by one. Explosives buried in the roads turned their marching formations into chaotic messes. The XL Varn's superior technology meant nothing when they couldn't even see their enemy. In a burning city, one XL Varn squad was moving through the ruins of what had once been a human military base. Their commander, Vortok, clicked his mandibles in frustration. "Where is the enemy?" he hissed. A moment later, a sound echoed through the street, a sharp metallic clang. Vortok turned just in time to see a small object roll toward his troops. Then everything turned white. The explosion sent XL Varn bodies flying, their armor useless against the high-impact fragmentation grenade. Before the survivors could recover, gunfire rained down from the rooftops. Humans, moving like shadows, eliminated the entire squad in seconds. Inside the Federation Council chamber, the alien representatives watched the invasion unfold in horror. The live feeds from XL Varn warships were chaotic. Bodies in the streets, wrecked vehicles, smoke and fire everywhere. The XL Varn should have been winning. Instead, they were being hunted to extinction. A Panner delegate swallowed nervously. This is impossible. The humans have no planetary defenses, no shields, no fortress worlds. Admiral Carter leaned back, arms crossed. We don't need them. Jorvan, the Federation's military strategist, shook his head in disbelief. But this doesn't make sense. Why refuse to build a traditional defense system? Carter chuckled darkly. Because then, idiots like the XL Varn wouldn't come down to fight us directly. His smile vanished. And that is when we are at our most dangerous. On Earth, the XL Varn High Command finally realized the truth. Their strategy was collapsing. The humans weren't engaging in direct battle because they never intended to. Instead, they had turned every city into a death trap. Desperate, the XL Varn sent in heavy walkers, massive war machines designed to crush enemy resistance. Their plasma cannons tore through buildings, reducing human hideouts to rubble. For a moment, it looked like the tide was turning. Then, from underground tunnels, human anti-tank teams emerged like ghosts. Portable missile launchers fired, hitting the weak spots in the walkers' armor. Explosions lit up the battlefield as the massive war machines fell, one by one. It wasn't war. It was extermination. And the XL Varn were the ones being wiped out. In orbit, the XL Varn Supreme Commander, Raxeltor, watched the massacre unfold on his screens. He had never seen anything like this before. His forces were being destroyed. A human transmission came through. The face of Admiral Carter appeared on the screen. "You thought Earth was weak," Carter said, voice calm but cold. "Now you understand your mistake." Raxeltor snarled. "This isn't over. We will bring reinforcements. We will." Carter interrupted with a small, knowing smile. "Who said we're letting you leave?" At that moment, Earth's true defense systems activated. Hidden railgun platforms emerged from underground silos. Satellites that had once been disguised as communication relays turned, revealing massive artillery cannons. And the real war began. The XL Varn had walked into a trap. Now, there was no escape. XL Varn forces were in full retreat, but there was nowhere to run. Their initial confidence had shattered. What was supposed to be a swift planetary conquest had turned into a slow, agonizing slaughter. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were dismantling the invasion, piece by piece. The XL Varn High Command had no choice but to order a tactical retreat, gathering their remaining ground forces near the landing zones. Their plan was simple: regroup, fortify, and wait for reinforcements from the fleet. But the humans were not going to let that happen. Near the northern landing zone, Commander Vortok, one of the few surviving officers, barked orders to his troops. "Hold this position. We will not be wiped out like cattle." His warriors, exhausted and terrified, scrambled to establish defenses. Plasma turrets were set up, and trenches were dug around the perimeter. The XL Varn had learned their lesson. They would not underestimate the humans again. A moment of silence stretched across the battlefield. The ruins of the city stood eerily still, smoke rising into the sky. Then came the sound, a deep rhythmic thud. One of the soldiers turned towards the horizon, mandibles clicking nervously. "Commander, what is that?" Vortok activated his visor's zoom function. Then his blood ran cold. From the shadows of the ruined city, they emerged. The Black Corps. Humans in advanced exosuits, their armor matte black, designed to blend into the darkness. Their movements were slow and deliberate, like predators stalking wounded prey. No insignia, no visible ranks, just death, marching forward. The XL Varn had encountered human soldiers before, but these were something else. "They sent the Black Corps," Vortok whispered, his voice hollow with fear. No one had seen these humans before and lived to tell the tale. In orbit, Supreme Commander Raxeltor watched the battle unfold through his command console. The humans had been methodical. But this was different. His tactical officer turned to him, eyes filled with dread. "Sir, the ground forces are sending distress calls. They're saying the humans have unleashed their elite units." Raxeltor clenched his claws. "How many?" The officer swallowed. We don't know. The transmissions keep cutting out. Then, silence. Every distress call abruptly stopped. No explosions, no sounds of battle. Just nothing. The human fleet was still waiting. Their orbital defenses were fully operational, their warships now blocking every possible escape route. Raxiltor realized the truth too late. They had never been fighting a war. They had been walking into an execution. On the ground, the Black Corp advanced. They didn't run. They didn't shout. They didn't even seem to acknowledge the Selvarn's frantic defenses. They simply moved forward. The first shots were fired, plasma bolts lighting up the night. The humans reacted instantly, their reflexes inhumanly fast. They ducked, sidestepped, dodged as if they already knew where the shots would land. Then they opened fire. Silenced weapons spat hypervelocity rounds, tearing through Selvarn armor like paper. Some Selvarn tried to fall back, but the moment they turned, they died. One warrior, desperate, lunged with a plasma blade. A human moved faster than his eyes could follow, dodging effortlessly before snapping his neck with a single brutal motion. Another Selvarn tried to surrender. The Black Corps soldier simply walked past him, placing a single shot through his skull. There was no hesitation, no mercy. The noose had tightened. The slaughter had begun. Commander Vortok had always believed in Selvarn superiority. Their empire had crushed countless civilizations, dominating entire sectors of the galaxy. But now he knew the truth. They had never fought anything like this before. The Black Corps moved like phantoms, silent and precise. Their weapons barely made a sound, yet every shot found its mark. The Selvarn were trained warriors, but against these humans, they were nothing more than prey. The perimeter was collapsing. Plasma turrets had been destroyed before they could even lock onto a target. Trenches once filled with soldiers now held only corpses. Vortok's forces were dwindling, and no reinforcements were coming. Above the battlefield, in the command ship fraction, Supreme Commander Raxiltor stood frozen, staring at the tactical display. The ground forces were vanishing. Entire squads were being wiped out within seconds. Their vitals blinked off the screen, one by one, like dying stars. How is this possible? His tactical officer whispered. Raxiltor didn't answer. He knew the truth. The humans had never needed a defense grid. Their strategy had been a trap from the very beginning. Let the enemy come. Let them think Earth was weak. And when they were deep inside human territory, wipe them out so completely that no one would dare challenge them again. Back on the ground, Vortok took cover behind a fallen transport, breathing heavily. Around him, his warriors were being hunted. He saw one of his officers, Jaren, try to rally the remaining troops. Hold your ground. Fight, you cowards. A shadow moved behind him. A Black Corps soldier emerged from the darkness. Jaren never even saw the blade. The human's combat knife plunged into his neck, severing his spine instantly. Jaren collapsed without a sound, his body twitching for a brief moment before going still. Vortok clenched his jaw. Enough. If he was going to die, he would die fighting. Ripping a plasma rifle from a fallen soldier, he aimed at the approaching human and fired. But the human was already gone. A flicker of movement, too fast to track. And suddenly, the Black Corps soldier was behind him. A fist slammed into Vortok's gut, cracking his armor like brittle glass. Pain exploded through his body. He collapsed to his knees, gasping for breath. The human loomed over him, visor reflecting Vortok's terrified face. Why? Vortok choked out. Why fight like this? Where is your honor? The human tilted his head slightly. Then, in a calm, measured voice, he spoke. You attacked our medics. A single gunshot echoed across the battlefield. Vortok's body slumped forward, lifeless. In orbit, Raxiltor watched as the last transmission from the ground forces cut to static. It was over. His fleet was still intact, but it didn't matter. He could order a full retreat, but the humans wouldn't allow it. The Black Court hadn't come to win a war. They had come to make sure there were no survivors. And as human warships locked onto the Selvarn fleet, Supreme Commander Raxeltor finally understood. Earth didn't need shields. Humanity itself was the ultimate weapon. Panic spread through the Selvarn fleet like wildfire. Officers shouted over one another, desperate to find a way out. But the humans had left them no escape. Raxeltor's claws gripped the edge of the command console as he stared at the tactical display. Red markers surrounded them on all sides. Human warships had formed an unbreakable wall, cutting off every possible retreat. "They have us boxed in," his tactical officer whispered, voice trembling. Raxeltor bared his fangs. "Send a message to the humans. We surrender." The comms officer hesitated. "Sir, the humans, they're not responding." Cold dread settled in Raxeltor's stomach. He had assumed the humans would accept surrender. After all, most species did. A defeated enemy was no longer a threat. But these were humans, and they were not fighting for victory. They were fighting for revenge. On board the human flagship Vengeance, Admiral Cole watched the Selvarn fleet squirm like trapped animals. His hands rested calmly behind his back as his officers awaited orders. The comms officer turned. "Sir, they're surrendering." Cole didn't even blink. "Ignore them." The officer hesitated but nodded. Everyone on the bridge understood why. The Selvarn had crossed a line that could never be forgiven. The order had already been given. No survivors. Raxeltor's spine stood on edge as he watched human warships advance. A massive cruiser moved into position, its forward cannons glowing with deadly energy. A new voice crackled over the speakers, a deep, calm human voice. "No surrender. No mercy. You should have never touched our medics." The comms cut. Then the human fleet opened fire. The Selvarn ships never stood a chance. The first barrage tore through their shields like paper. Explosions bloomed across the fleet as ship after ship was ripped apart. The Vraxian shook violently as enemy fire slammed into its hull. Raxeltor grabbed onto the console, his mind racing. This wasn't a battle anymore. It was a slaughter. "Evasive maneuvers," he barked. But it was useless. One by one, his ships were snuffed out like dying stars. His officers screamed as the bridge was rocked by another explosion. Fire and smoke filled the room. A second blast tore through the lower decks. The ship began to split apart. Raxeltor stumbled forward, staring at the view screen. The last thing he saw was the Earth fleet looming over them like vengeful gods. Then, in a blinding flash of light, the Selvarn Empire's greatest fleet was no more. Far below, on Earth, the surviving medics of the humanitarian corps received the news. Justice had been served. But they didn't cheer. They simply nodded in grim silence. They knew the cost of war. And they knew that from this day forward, no one would ever dare harm a human medic again. The battlefield was silent. Where the mighty Selvarn fleet once stood, only wreckage remained. Broken hulls drifted aimlessly, their fires extinguished in the cold vacuum of space, the last remnants of an empire that had dared to cross the line. On board the human flagship Vengeance, Admiral Cole stared at the aftermath. No emotion, no satisfaction, just cold, calculated understanding. A lesson had been taught, a lesson that would never be forgotten. "Broadcast the message," Cole ordered. The comms officer nodded and sent the transmission to every known species in the galaxy. The screen flickered to life. The image of a burning Selvarn battleship filled the display, its insignia, once a symbol of strength, now reduced to ashes. Then, in bold, unignorable letters, a message appeared. "To all who hear this, humanity does not seek war. But if you harm our healers, there will be no surrender, no mercy, no survivors." The message was simple and terrifying. Across the galaxy, the broadcast was received. On the Selvarn homeworld, the ruling council watched in horrified silence. their greatest fleet, annihilated. Their warlords, once so proud, now trembled in fear. They had broken the rules of war, and now they had no army left to defend themselves. The silence was broken by a single phrase, whispered by an elder general. "We have awakened something that should have never been disturbed." In the heart of the Galactic Federation, alien leaders debated in panicked voices. The humans, they wiped out an entire fleet, without hesitation. They did not hesitate because they do not forget. "They warned us," another leader murmured. "They always said their medics were untouchable, and we never understood why." They understood now. Humans were not conquerors, but they were something far worse when provoked. The Federation quickly passed a new law. No species shall harm a human medic under any circumstances. Any who do will face the same fate as the XL Varn. On Earth, the survivors of the Humanitarian Corps gathered in solemn reflection. Justice had been served, but they took no joy in it. They were healers, not warriors. They had never asked for vengeance. But now, they knew that no enemy would ever dare target them again. A promise had been made, a warning had been given, and the galaxy would never forget.